Marvelous. Yeah, modeling the model. Of course, I'm not going to read what is published online already. So I have prepared this PowerPoint, which is, I hope it's going to be provocative enough. So my paper is organized around this hypothesis that there might be a certain type of probabilistically acquired embodied calculus that meditates our sensory perception. That would imply that what we cognitively perceive and what we like to call our reality is actually a model. And here there is one example. We can literally see the model without being aware of it in such moments when non-stimulus-driven inputs allow early neurons to respond even to stimuli which are inferred but not directly presented to the retina. Well, I'm prone to think that a peculiar sort of dynamism of reality as a reality model in which we partake is a type of functional complexity that goes beyond both perceptually experiential and cognitively perceptual human scale. It's my intuition that the complexity of human reality as a reality model should be at least the function of component complexity and system complexity. And here under system complexity, I refer to the complexity resulting from the relationship between the functional processes like communication, concurrence, multi-instance, which have their internal component complexity. However, imagine for a moment the situation where what we experience as our reality turns to be a bio-emergent topological complexity. Biological development takes advantage of certain physical or chemical manifestation of mathematical possibilities usable for the dynamical development of certain forms. It adopts these possibilities and turns them to its own purpose. The opposite type of getting an inspiration from is not so rare in biology. Yeah, so now we come back to the problem that we have started to discuss early this morning, defining consciousness. Yeah, I think that it's a dynamic process, not a thing, not a capacity, and how to relate brain properties of consciousness by offering mathematical or logical or verbal conceptual models. Here I cite set et al. And problems connected to modeling consciousness while weighing sensory and social perception against each other in the theater of action where Bayesian brain plays us, puns on us, while playing with itself. This is what I'm going to describe in more detail in a written text. Perceiving is believing. Yeah. A Bayesian approach to explaining symptoms of schizophrenia. There is another example that I'm giving you here. So advances in cognitive neuroscience offer us new ways to understand the symptoms of mental illness by uniting basic neurochemical and neurophysiological observations with the conscious experience that characterize these symptoms. Cognitive theories about the positive symptoms of schizophrenia, which is hallucination and delusions, have tended to treat perception on the one hand and the belief on the other hand, formation of belief, as distinct processes. However, recent advances in computational neuroscience have led us to consider the unusual perceptual experience of patients and their sometimes bizarre beliefs as part of the same core abnormality, a disturbance in error-dependent updating of inference and beliefs about the world. So, here is an old position of Myhrvold, that he sees the virtue in Bayesian account of unification. A huge problem is how to treat the unification, the supposedly important unification of knowledge in our approaches to what we think that is our reality. I'm not so sure that it is now the only position. Of course, Bayesian account is only one of the possible approaches to unify knowledge and somehow to combine certain approaches to consciousness and to model them. Look at this picture. What do you see? Wall? Anything else? What? Bird. Lovely. More ideas? about bricks, the floor? Okay, nobody sees the cigar. Nobody sees the cigar. How to? Pointer. Top. And where is it? The top. Okay. No. I'm the pointer. This is the cigar. And this is the ashes. Okay. It's very dumb. It's very simple. Okay, now you see it. Our brain continually reconstructs an inner world from incomplete information, relying on memory, what is likely in a scene. Here, the object in question is rather unusual in a brick wall. Furthermore, the photo is taken from such an angle that the object aligns with the mortar gap. But once you have seen it, the slight deviation from a mortar gap proper becomes obvious. You cannot unseen it. Now, do you see the cigar? No. Still no. Okay, you're an unusual...
Bad vision.
Yeah, bad vision. Okay. Unification of sciences and Bayesian virtue. Poznansky said very recently, I think this year, neural computation described observer-relative intelligence and not observer-independent intelligence, biological intrinsic intelligence. Biological intrinsic intelligence currently lacks a unified theory. The mathematical foundations of the core concepts have to be advanced and unified in order to be able to realize and better understand cognitive systems. Quantum mechanics will be used that exploit their embodiment in a completely intrinsic way. But there is a problem here because we have the wet circumstances in the biological forms, and it's not really the same as the physical properties. So biological development, just a second. Okay. Yeah. Here I still reflect upon the unification of phenomena. If here Myhrvold says something which is very important, I think, is the ability of a theory to unify phenomena an epistemic virtue relevant to the degree of confidence we can justifiably place in the theory, or is it merely a pragmatic one? If epistemic, is this based on a priori knowledge that nature is simple or oversimple? Or does the ability of the theory to provide a unified account of disparate phenomena contribute to the evidential support these phenomena lend to the theory? Okay, now I borrowed 13 features of consciousness that require theoretical explanation from Seth et al. And well, I'm not going to read that, just take a look at it. Some of these properties, let's say properties of consciousness, are highly debatable now. On some of them we can say yes, I agree with this, but all in all, consciousness is not easy to define. Consciousness is a necessary aspect of decision-making and adaptive planning. Conscious scenes have an allocentric character. They show intentionality, yet they are shaped by egocentric frameworks. Consciousness accompanies various forms of learning. Consciousness experience is reportable by humans verbally, non-verbally. Consciousness is subjective and private and often attributed to an experiencing self, and so on. Conscious scenes are unitary. Consciousness is accompanied by regular low amplitude, fast, up to 70 Hz electrical brain activity, and so on. Global workspace theories. An almost antiquated approach by now. Now I'm going to give you just a short view of what was going on from 2003 onwards. So the global neural workspace model predicts that conscious presence is a nonlinear function of stimulus salience. A gradual increase in stimulus visibility should be accompanied by a sudden transition of the neuronal workspace into a corresponding activity. Information integration theory models of consciousness based on several axioms. The information axioms asserts that every experience is specific. The integration axiom asserts that each experience is unified. And exclusion axiom asserts that every experience is definite. IIT formalizes these intuitions with postulates. So here I go into discussing more about this. In this same IIT perspective, a complex is a set of elements specifying a maximally reducible constellation of concepts where the maximum is evaluated over elements and at the optimal spatio-temporal scale. Yeah, let's go on. Multiple drafts theory. Consciousness defined as only mechanism of consciousness success and global influence. The multiple drafts model understands conscious experiences taking time to occur. Percepts do not instantaneously arise in the mind in the full richness. And Dennett from 1991, well, we spoke about him yesterday as well. Consciousness explained. I'm not going to read these 6 things that he believes in. Neuronal Darwinism, Edelman. The theory of neural group selection. Edelman's neuronal Darwinism was developed rather recently by Tononi and Edelman. So this theory proposes that consciousness entailed by extensive reentrant interactions among neuronal populations in the thalamocortical system, the so-called dynamic core. And then they go on with this dynamic core, and the key claim is that conscious qualia are these high-dimensional discriminations. Of course, criticism by Francis Crick, and recent reinterpretation by evolutionary neurodynamics by Chatemery and Crisanta Fernando. And here's what the neural replicator hypothesis by Crisanta Fernando in 2010 says. They propose that replication with mutation of patterns of neuronal activity can occur within the brain using known neurophysiological processes. Okay, so I go more swiftly. Let me go on with just showing you slides from different theories. Thalamocortical rhythms, hypothesis that synchronous oscillation in thalamocortical loops in the gamma band of frequency creates a conscious states. Yeah, neural field theories, hypothesis that consciousness depends on global aspects of brain function. Subcortical models, something different from what has been described today. It's not only cortical properties, but also subcortical models that have been investigating recently. Also, experimental psychological findings that are maybe important. The world beyond the immediate sensorium, the hippocampus role in scene construction, where the recent findings, they claim, Magaye and Malala claim and argue that in order to leverage this long-standing issue, traditional notions regarding the architecture of memory should be changed. And the view, they say that the hippocampus is constantly constructing spatially coherent scenes, automatically anticipating and synthesizing representations of the world beyond the immediate sensorium. I'm going to write more about that. Experimental psychology findings, again, with hippocampal damage, simulation models and self-modeling. Revonsuo, Finnish scientist, world simulation metaphor hypothesis that consciousness arises from immersion in an internal simulation of organism-environment interaction. Metzinger's self-model theory of subjectivity. There are no such things as selves in the world. Instead, there exist phenomenal self-models. Rick Grush, the emulation theory of representation, motor control, imagery, and perception. Okay, here I go on with this. And radical plasticity, consciousness, the radical plastical thesis. Kodam, a model of attention leading to creation of consciousness. Orchestrated objective reduction from the 90s, recently revived by the discovery of quantum vibration in microtubulus inside brain neurons. Quantum biological field theory by Poznansky, very recently discussed. And topological models of consciousness. I'm going to end with this. In my paper, I opted for the very, very recent topological models of consciousness by Arturo Tozzi and his group of scientists. Their treatment of the mindful brain from the perspective of topodynamics offers a provoking and inclusive review of the most challenging issues of neuroscience. First, it appeals to a model of model brain-mind functioning called operational architectonics, while the second promotes a topodynamic description in terms of projections and mappings that take place on abstract structures equipped with different dimensions, curvatures, and constraints. So I'm not going to, here we don't have time much for this, but in the written text I'm going to write about the strange face in the mirror illusion by Caputo, and well, you see the statistics here. When you look at your face in the mirror in the dim light in your bathroom, after some time, 90% of you, if you are healthy and not depressed, if you are healthy, I underline this, you'll see deformed facial traits. 75% said they've seen a monster, 50% said they saw aspects of their own face in their partner's face, and 15% said they've seen a relative's face. So I go on with these illusions. We don't have time to go on with this. I'm going to end this, this presentation in a while. Just be patient. You may give a description of this Caputo's experiment by Troxler's fading. Or, of course, he says that in psychiatric terms that it's the result of deficits of facial expression and facial recognition of emotions which are involved in the relationship between the patient or the patient's ego and his face image, or the patient's bodily self and its reflection in the mirror. But my opinion is quite different. I think that the elaboration of this problem is different, should be differently elaborated, and the missing information by Bayesian modeling of sensory reality is what actually describes Caputo's finding. And here's the end. I have seen the end. No one was spared, not even the children. That could be connected to the previous lecture. Thank you.
Thank you for the presentation. So, any questions? There was a wide variety of topics, so I'm sure there are some questions. Maybe?
Maybe one.
Yeah.
Okay.
I have that impression after this presentation. I'm seeing kind of rational-based mandala here, with full of thoughts and ideas
Yes.
of different kinds.
I also have mine, but, well, no time for that.
But that's the reason maybe why it would be interesting for me to hear your opinion about, for example, a person with Alzheimer's disease without knowing his real name, or anything, any thought, having any thought in their minds. Do they have consciousness? And what's it?
Yeah, as I said in the beginning, as I showed as well, from different perspectives and different approaches to solve this trouble, there is no solution that would be a definite answer to what you say. But I think, yes, my position is that there is a consciousness, and that we should not attribute consciousness exclusively to certain parts of cortex, As you have seen, there are experiments in hippocampus and some other parts of the brain that could define the consciousness not only in the brain and the body-brain niche with the exchange not only with the brain but also with body-brain relationship and the exchange with the niche autopoiesis. But on the other hand, there is a third perspective that opens up the position of the consciousness on some higher perspectives that could be calculated as well.
So what are you saying is that all the theories that we might have
Yes.
might not be able to explain something that's unexplainable, that's kind of awareness, just awareness.
I'm not sure that it's completely unexplainable. We have to go on with trying to explain it. I don't know, what do you mean by unexplainable?
That
There
means
are...
that we don't have right tools to approach.
Yeah,
phenomenon.
that's why I have given you at least 30 different approaches with very, very thorough findings in order to solve the mystery. My personal view is that that we have to somehow give the formalization of complexity, of irreducible heterogeneity of the classes, because the classes are heterogeneous, especially in biology. So, if we could deal with this heterogeneity and formalize it, then the answer to your mystical question could be somewhere. My position is that we are modeling the model. So, we don't perceive the reality as we see, but our brain perceives the reality for us, gives the Bayesian or some other calculus, and then we see what we see as it was prepared for us by our brains and maybe wired for us by our neuronal connection on the humankind level, by connectome connections and the extension of the connectome connections. So nothing is so mysterious. It's all in us. It's just somehow to formalize the complexity and model the model.
Okay, thank you. Unfortunately, we are short on time.
I'm
so
sorry that I was so...
Ne, še ena tema je tvoj delo. Ja, da pač